Hello and welcome. So glad you've joined us. My name's Victoria Kettis and I'm a mum. I'm also a manager and facilitator with Family Smart. So as parents, when our kids are having a hard time or we see something for the first time, we might question what's going on. We often wonder what are typical behaviors and how we know when something more might be going on for our child or youth. Our gut is telling us something's going on, but it's difficult to put our finger on it. So let's watch an animation to help us understand this and put some into context of the conversation we're going to have today.
Why can it feel so tricky to tell if our kids are on track, going through a phase, as opposed to struggling with something more or beyond the behaviors? It's so difficult to know if your child is presenting developmentally in range and when it's something more because thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are always found on a continuum and because we're always changing and developing. It's hard to tell because we're all parenting in the same pool. There's a deep end and there's a shallow end. For those of us who are swimming in the shallow end, we can stretch out our legs. We have a platform to stand on when we need to take a break to catch our breath. We feel more available for things like play, enjoyment, and adventure. It's not always awesome and easy, but for the most part, it's ticking along just fine. Others of us are parenting in the deep end, where we have to be on almost all the time. We're very busy putting out fires, and we feel high levels of parenting stress for long periods of time. You might wonder, why does it look so easy for everyone else? There are people at the edge of the pool for whom it can be tough to tell the shallow from the deep. There are spectators who observe who's in the pool. They might have kids playing independently in the shallow. They're lounging on beach chairs, sipping cold drinks, keeping one eye on their child, and maybe having an occasional request that they can adapt to, like, "Mom, can I have a sandwich?" "Well, not sure if I have sandwiches, but you can have a granola bar." "Aw, man, okay." And they continue to play. And then we have lifeguards. Those are monitor people in the pool. They monitor for signs that swimmers might need extra help. Parents in the shallow might be confused about why the parents in the deep end are having such a hard time having fun. Those parents seem to panic so often, find themselves drained and gasping for breath. They tread water more than they swim laps, and they usually have a child clinging to them for dear life. After a while, the parents in the deep end start to wonder if those in the shallow maybe have a point. Maybe we are making too much of this. Maybe I'm the problem. That can lead to shame, isolation, or silence. Those standing on the edge holding the life ring might have some training about how to throw the ring, but many of them aren't really sure who to throw the ring toward or when. Or if you've tread water in the deep long enough, the ring might actually be floating near you, but you A, aren't sure if it's the right ring for you, B, you're tired and you are worn, too worn to reach for it, or C, I don't want others in the pool seeing me need this ring just to stay afloat. Deep end parents who are isolated, overwhelmed, and good at pretending that it's great in the deep end are the parents who drown more quickly and the kids who start thinking that the "this is beyond normal" is about who they are, not the water that they're swimming in. Some parents are what I call synchronized swimmers. They've got that forced smile on their face. They're performing pretty well, but underneath the water, their heart is racing, their limbs are flailing, and they're trying to keep their breath. It makes it hard, actually, for lifeguards to see that you're struggling in the deep, or that you might need a real break. This can also make it more difficult to fully be noticed or understood by the lifeguards, by the swimmers in the shallow, or the spectators on the sidelines. What also makes it confusing is that kids who swim mostly in the deep occasionally spend time in the shallow. The key is to consider where they spend most of their time and their energy. So you might hear others say things like, "They seem fine when they're at school," or "When we camped together this summer with you guys, the kids seemed to get along just fine." That might just be because they only see your kid when they visit the shallow end. It also might make it more confusing for you. When you see your kid able to control their emotions or complete tasks without a whole lot of coaching, you might be baffled when the very next day they can't just seem to do those things anymore. It's a pretty defeating feeling to watch that as a parent, thinking you haven't made any gains. Asking for a life ring can require vulnerability, bravery, stamina, and an ability to weed through the available supports for the ones that fit your needs best. No small task when you're almost out of air and taking on water. I learned to swim better when others recognized I was swimming in the deep water, when the water was framed for me in context to what I was struggling with and why, and when I was told it's okay to take care of yourself. We know that naming the depth of the pool early is important for learning to swim in rough waters and strong currents that are ever-changing. It's important for your child who is struggling in those same waters and is half the size and doesn't have half the equipment to deal with the storms. When you feel like you're just hanging on, it's probably something more. And that means it's not just okay to reach for a life ring, it is encouraged. You are a good parent who is dealing with treacherous and relentless swimming conditions. There are other parents in the deep who do get it, and they are a resource. There are professionals who do understand that you are the expert on your child, and that while there are no simple fixes, you are not alone. There are a lot of situations that will land a person in the deep end of the pool. They might be your child's mental health, and it might be your own, and it's okay to be curious about both. Neither are your fault, and both are important for your wellness and your functioning as a family. It might be because of circumstances or experiences in your life that were out of your control. There are safe places to talk about the deep end, to look at it from many angles and offer it compassion and attention. Sometimes we need to problem solve. Sometimes we need to adjust our expectations and adapt our approach to parenting. And sometimes we need to grieve or heal so that we can be present and connected. The goal is always to belong to one another better and grow to our capacity, no matter where you find yourself in the pool.
So today's conversation helps us to better understand what to expect physically, emotionally, cognitively, and socially at different ages, and when something may be more. I am joined today by the lovely Karen Peters, a registered clinical counselor and mom. Karen, thanks for joining us.
It is awesome to be here.
So I'm going to let you introduce a little bit more about you so our viewers know who they're spending some time with today.
Yeah, so I am a mom of two, and I work primarily in private practice, helping navigate some hard stuff with parents and with their kids, and in the bigger context of family and all the dynamics that come with that, and our child development stuff and all those pieces. So we try and weave all of that into the work that I do. And so it's lovely to be part of these conversations, because I can't get enough about talking about mental health and how that lives itself out in the day-to-day for our kids as they grow.
Awesome. And what I really appreciate is that all the stuff we're talking about, you live every day as well. So thank you for sharing your perspective. So Karen, as teenagers, there's a lot going on for them. And so there's such a wide continuum of what's expected. Can you delve into that a little bit more, and what's expected, and when we can look at that and see, oh yeah, okay, that's a teenage thing. So begin, because I know it's going to be, it's wide and
I
varied.
know. It's a huge age range.
Yeah.
So much change happens between 13 and 16. And I'll say also that there's no hard line, of course, between tween age and teenage. So 12 to 13, we could blend some of that. Some of your 12-year-olds you might hear in the story of what we're talking about today. And for others of you, you're thinking, well, my 13-year-old's not there yet. And that's okay. And that's in the realm of what's expected. So maybe to dive in a little bit to first what we expect of kids developmentally in this age range might help us give us a bit of a goalpost or a kind of boundary around when it might be something more. So when I try and help parents sort through a little bit of where's my kid at, I often break it down into categories of development, because otherwise it just feels like way too overgeneralized. So if we think about physical development for 13 to 16-year-olds, I'm sure you are all very in the know already about what is happening in their bodies. And it is a whole lot of messiness and change. And it's discombobulating, right, for our kids. They don't know what's happening. And you can read all the books, but when you have that lived experience of things changing and how it actually translates for you in real life, that is like a bit of a shocker. So your kids are in the throes of that at varying degrees, right? And so as this slow but fast change happens in their bodies, they have a sense of a heightened sense of being able to belong and fit in, but also when they're standing out. And so this is happening at the same time as all the changes in their body. So interestingly enough, something that occurs is that girls who develop earlier are more self-conscious typically, and boys who develop early are more confident. So isn't that an interesting piece of what we would say is normal or typical or expected? Is the typical experience for girls is that if they're on the earlier end in their cohort of developing, it makes them question more typically what's happening for them, and they feel like shrinking away because nobody else is there yet. And there's more self-consciousness that's happening. But for boys, it feels good that they're ahead of the game on that front. So that's something to be aware of, that's totally normal, but something to pay attention to. And another thing that happens physically for kids at this age is it's a lot more about things like physical expression through team sports. It's collaborative stuff or something that they are very well suited for. So all those years you've exposed them to different kinds of activities, they are now choosing something. They're the basketball player. They're the thing that they've glommed onto is now also not about just about their physical capacity, but also about what they're passionate about. And so their interest tends to narrow their field of what they're experiencing, but their body is so much more capable of participating in that kind of activity. So that's completely expected. Emotionally, because of all the hormone changes, we're expecting mood swings, and we're expecting strong feelings, and we're expecting some self-conscious thought. So paying extra attention to how I am compared to somebody else, how I fit, how I don't fit. I think the biggest piece around what fits for kids that are on track is the storyline of when I feel these things big, I have a skill set to manage them for the most part. So I have a way of adjusting. I have a way of taking ownership. So if I have a strong reaction, I'm also, when I'm calmer, able to see another person's perspective, and I'm able to kind of navigate. That was a huge emotion. That was probably a little bit out of range of the situation. And I can apologize to somebody, and I can, there's a full circle that happens afterwards. It's not just a blow up and I didn't feel in control and now I don't know how to handle that reaction. And the other piece that's really typical for kids in this age is that they have increased stress around social acceptance because of the phase that they're in. Mm-hmm. And they're questioning this and they're testing it out among their peer, and they're trying to work toward independence and leaning in on peers more. The gravity of being included or excluded feels much stronger. And so when something happens, particularly this was never in the parenting manual a decade or two ago, we are having to figure out how to do this on social media and have boundaries around digital interaction and what's okay with me and what's not okay, and how do I take care of myself in that space, and how do I take care of other people in that space, people who matter to me. And navigating that level of stress is no easy task. But kids who are on track, you'll notice that they're finding some way through. They're finding some way to be themselves in the midst of all of that. And another huge emotional piece that is very normal, very totally expected, is an increased desire for privacy. So when they start closing their door, when they don't want to show you their phone, right? So yes, there's always that line of, if it becomes unsafe and there's something really detrimental going on and we see other behavioral cues for that, then we have a talk about what the purpose of privacy is and when it's safe to have privacy, and when it edges into isolation. But having an increased sense of privacy is totally a new playing field for this age group who want a right to their own sense of self and their own space. So expect that. And between 13 and 16, when we see more in the interaction piece around social stuff, they are starting to explore beyond friendships. What does it mean to have kind of sexual interest? And so all new territory again of like, who do I have the urge to flirt with? And who's flirting with me? And what am I attracted to? And what do I feel is attractive about me? And all of that is this, it's a bit like a candy shop, right? It's just like everything feels new. And so, yeah, lots of questions about that will come up, and that's great, totally healthy. Also, they are able to kind of, I think this is a hard one for parents because this is expected because they have not figured this part out yet. And it can feel uncomfortable because we watch kids label or generalize people, quick to judge, and we go, oh no, they don't have empathy, and they don't. This is also that area of gray where they're in it, but they're not through it. So this is a lot of testing and making a lot of assumptions about people, and that's expected in this age. Part of that is because they are asserting their independence, and the process for doing that is this egocentricity. So it's like, everything's about me. I have all the data. I know it all. This is the know-it-all attitude stage of, I got this. Don't tell me what you know. I know better than you do. And, you don't understand me. That's very common. And that's because it's setting a boundary to say, I can't rely on somebody else's impression of me. I have to figure this out for myself. And so super uncomfortable sometimes to deal with that, but really totally healthy. They're exploring things like beliefs. Like, what do I believe? Not just what I've been taught to believe. What do I think is true? Who am I? Those big questions, which then come with the rebellion. And I'm going to try all the sizes on before I choose the size that fits for me. And At the same time, 13 to 16-year-olds don't just want independence. Secretly, they also want adult approval. So lots of tugs for relationship, but not in such pretty ways. So sometimes they're coming at you in not nice ways, but the desire is there to get you to react, to get you to interchange with them, to have this relationship. And so that's not gone yet. You haven't lost your kids at 13, 14, 15. They're just asking for the attention in different ways. So,
yeah. And in their eyes, it could be in any way. So good or bad, it's attention, and they're still.
I'll take what.
Yeah.
Totally. Yes. Yeah. Cognitive is the last area that I'll touch on here. And I'm just going to say this about cognitive development. The last part of the brain to develop is the center at the front of our brains that is responsible for things like executive functioning, which I think of kind of like a suitcase with a lot of goods in it. It's a bit of a package that has things like, can I interpret my scenario accurately? Can I take in all the information and organize it? Can I plan ahead? Can I take responsibility? Can I organize, and can I regulate my big emotions that I'm having? And that we call, when it's fully developed, we call that adulting. You know how adulting is hard? We even have a hard time with it. Yeah, that's adulting. That suitcase is adulting. Teens are not there yet. That part of the brain does not get fully developed until close to 25 years old. So have patience, not just for them, but also for yourselves as parents. When you see them struggling with that and you think, oh no, I haven't taught them well, that's a capacity thing. So we have to remember what they're capable of doing, and that they're practicing and rehearsing in everyday moments of life to grow that part of their brain. So I'll leave that piece, because I think that says a lot just about, can they take on responsibilities? And you're going to watch for that. And if those things are happening, then your kid's probably doing a great job and kind of on the middle of the track.
Right. And when I think of that, I mean, it is a hard place, because we think that they should be able to make better decisions.
Yeah.
And why can't you make better decisions? Why can't you act your age? There's so much going on that they haven't discovered yet, and they're not able to do those things. And we often think they won't do those things.
Yes.
So I think it's a good reminder of just that developmental piece in our brains, that it's not always won't, it's often can't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautifully put.
So when we look at this and we see all of the expected, now where are the places that it's more, when we look at those areas of our development? What is it that we need to be curious and pay bigger attention to, because it is not in the expected aspect of what it is to be a teenager?
Right. So something more for 13 to 16-year-olds in the physical realm is if they're not managing their own body's care. So are they struggling to do basic hygiene? Do they experience a lot of shame attached? So it could be silent shame, and it can be out loud shame. You might hear a lot of harsh rhetoric, that almost self-talk but out loud, almost like on a speaker, where you're hearing them mutter to themselves or really put themselves down. If there's like a controlling aspect to this of, I need to control how my body is taking shape, which means it usually translates into things like, I'm controlling my food intake, I'm controlling my exercise in a way that's not consistent with the pattern that I used to get out of enjoyment. Binging, purging behaviors, things like that. Something very, it's a tender age of self-development. And so those are the times we want to be watching for those shifts in how we relate to things like food and movement. Another piece that we can watch for in the physical realm is our physiological response to things like anxiety. So if you have a really anxious kid, you're going to see them in fight, flight, and freeze mode much more often than a typical kid in that age category, right? So are they managing some of those changes in a way that sends alarm bells off in their body? And if that's happening on the regular, there's something more happening for them that needs a bit of extra padding and coaching and help along the way. And the only other thing I'll say about physical is it's around sleep. Teenagers need a ton of sleep the way toddlers need sleep. So if you're worried when your kid wants to do nothing but sleep in, don't panic. That's okay. You want them to get enough sleep. So having a good sleep hygiene, sleep routine, working with them on what's going to work for you is a really great way to kind of come alongside kids who are struggling to get enough rest for all the physiological changes that are happening in their body that they need the energy for. For that one, it's hard to measure, but I would say, are they functioning? So if they're not getting enough sleep, you're going to see how that translates in their day-to-day functioning, and that'll give you a cue if it's enough. Emotionally, the big one is, are they able to somehow find ways to manage their emotion? Managing our emotion will look like things like, yes, they're going to have the strong emotion for sure. That's okay. And sudden mood changes are not uncommon, so that's okay. But teens usually have the ability to own their own responses, like I had mentioned before. And if that ownership of coming back full circle and managing it well and doing the repair with other people, if they've had strong reactions, if that piece isn't there, then there might be something more going on, and the relationships might suffer if they can't do that piece. We also want to look for, even though there's expected pushback and independence, is the defiance crossing other people's boundaries? So if there's a strong sense that our kids can't be respectful of another person's lived experience, if they can't respond respectfully to other people's safety and wellness boundaries, that's a flag. Are they in that category? Are they using physical aggression to express themselves? That can be really concerning. So watching for that. Mood-wise, if you're seeing not swings, but low dips into valleys that they can't seem to recover from, then we're going to be watching for things like depression, anxiety, things that are happening socially that might make them retreat or feel like they have to find a sense of safety that isn't automatically there. So long periods of sadness or irritability, or just stuck in a mood that they can't lift themselves from. Another big piece here, I think, for emotions is, can your teen feel and identify what they're feeling and then communicate it? If that isn't there, that's going to cause a whole bunch of problems for them. So can they tap into what's happening for them personally? And are they able to freely express that somewhere? It won't be to everywhere. But can they name it? And is there safe space to process that? If they really struggle to say how they're feeling and what they think, then we're missing that piece of independence gaining, right? Where they can say, I know what I think and feel about this, right? And when they can't assert that or they can't identify it, that's a flag. And also if they stop caring. So if all along they've been really, and I don't mean this as the shaping thing. So, we used to have kids who are like in everything, and now they've like shaped what they want to be interested in, and they're really motivated to do specific things. That's kind of like pruning a tree. We want the pruned tree, but what we don't want is cut the tree down, right? And so have they just stopped caring? And if they stop caring, that's an important signal that something more might be happening for them. If at all they allude to thoughts of harming themselves or somebody else, these are conversations that we need to be actively attending to, not just hoping they'll go away. So that's something to pay attention to too. And then we talk about the social piece of how do we then bridge what we're experiencing emotionally with how we interact with other people. And if they just stop participating and we're seeing isolation, that is likely something more than what we'd expect at this age. Another piece that can happen on the other side of the extreme is fawning. So fawning is one of the 4 F's of safety, right? And so when we can freeze, we can fly, we can fight, or we can fawn. And fawning is not one we talk about often. But in this stage of development, when kids feel like their peers' opinion of them matters so much, it is ripe for fawning. It is, if you don't have a sense of self developing at the same time as this increased need for social acceptance from peers, then what can happen is kids default to blending and lose a sense of who they are in the mix. And so they're not adding themselves to the mix, they're becoming somebody else. And so fawning looks like abandoning yourself and your needs and your wants in order to feel some, and it's not going to be genuine, but some sense of acceptance, right? You can't accept what you don't know. So if you're not coming to the table, then it's not truly being accepted by somebody. But that's the worry, is I won't belong if I don't become somebody else. So watching for that is can be really helpful to detect that, because I think kids have a hard time naming that for themselves.
Thank you. And I'm wondering if we can clarify that just a bit more. So
Sure.
say I'm a teenager who is really into band, loves being in band, don't feel like that's my home, I'm not fitting in still. And then I meet someone who's the kid that's going out and maybe smoking out back and doing some risky behaviors, that all of a sudden I drop all of that and become more like them because they'll accept me and now I'm part of that group. Would that be an example of what fawning looks like?
Yeah. Yes. So fawning is like, I will drop what matters to me in exchange for
What matters to you?
a belief that I belong. Yeah, that I feel somehow that I matter to somebody, but it's an exchange for who I am. I have to, it's at cost.
Okay.
It comes at cost. It's not because of who I am, it's at cost of who I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, the piece around stress management, because stress is so much higher, particularly in the social arena, how do your kids cope with that stress? So we're not saying if they're on track, they don't experience stress. It's how do they manage the stress that they're experiencing? So if you see kids collapsing or disappearing kind of in the mix, that's something to watch for as well. Always watching for the bullying dynamic, because that's an exchange of control. So either the need to have control or to be controlled, that's a concern. And watching how our kids' friends groups exist. So at this stage, this is not, I need to belong to everybody. This is, I want to belong to a certain group of kids that are on the same page, that get each other, that, we can ask deeper questions with, that we can feel safe with. And so that doesn't happen automatically. None of us do that. I don't do that with everybody at work. I gravitate to a certain few, right? I don't do that in my family. There's a few that I will tell a lot to, and there's other people I have more boundaries with. And this is that stage where kids are discerning solid loyalty, trust, and safety with friendships. And so we're watching for, do our kids have a group that they can count on? Mm-hmm. And if they don't, then that's something to be curious about. What's happening that prevents that from happening? Mm-hmm. Is it their environment? Is it something about how they're managing some of those social things? And I would also say something to watch for is things like school refusal, and for social reasons. So are they terrified of going to school, and why? So if you start to hear things like, I'm avoiding it, it's a bit of a slippery slope, right? It usually doesn't start all of a sudden one day with, I'm not going. Yeah. But it's usually, I'm not going to show up to band practice, or I'm going to play hooky for that class, or I'm going to, or I'm not doing my homework for that teacher. And then it starts to erode, and we get to the place where they're like, there's nothing about school that feels safe to me. And if that's because of a social piece, that's something to pay attention to. It can also happen, and I'm going to move now into the cognitive piece. It can also be school refusal. If you get curious about why that is for them, it might not be social at all. And it might be because they can't keep up cognitively. Mm-hmm. And the shame that they might feel for not being in the mix of where other kids are at, that they can't keep up academically on any of the core subjects, that can feel really defeating. Yeah. They might feel like the spotlight's on them, and it might be hard for them to know who to ask for help and how. So whether it's for social reasons or for cognitive reasons, if your kid's resisting that environment, get curious as to why. And then the only other piece I would say around cognitive pieces is really in that executive functioning piece, that we know already that they don't have everything well developed in that area, but we do want to see steady growth in things like, can they get organized? Can they follow through and hand things in on, can they like manage time? Do I know when something's due and can I actually get it done? It's okay if they procrastinate. That is healthy and normal, but at the wire, do they, pull it together and do they get it done? Decision making, do you start to see them make more well-rounded, healthy, comprehensive decisions and not just reactions to certain information? Yeah, and our kids at this age, what we want so badly for them is to start dreaming. This is that beginning stage where they start realistically exploring things like my first volunteer job, my first leadership role, my first paid position. Where do I, can I stock grocery shelves? Can I babysit other people's pets? Can I exhibit responsibility and feel a sense of accomplishment and competency and confidence in that area? When our kids are struggling with those types of things and they start to feel like, I can't do things, I don't have hope for those things, I don't see a future in that, I don't, all my peers are talking about where they want to go to college, I don't have a clue. It's okay not to have answers, but to be asking the questions is really healthy. And if they don't know how to ask those, it's a space we should enter with our teens.
I love ending on a strength in our teens is their ability to dream. In thinking about some of the things you said, you talked about how it's expected that our teens will want more privacy and demand more privacy. But we also know that when they stop talking to us and not able to communicate their emotions were things that you spoke of. What about those teens that aren't having conversations with us? And I think that happens more often than not as parents. We're not hearing about the things that our kids are feeling and thinking because they share that with their friends and their peers. So we're kind of left out of the conversation. So what would you suggest for parents like that who are trying to respect their children's privacy and at the same time know that they're not hearing the things they may need to hear to know that there is something more going on?
Sometimes I think we feel like we need to be sneaky, and you might need to be sneaky. Sometimes we need to sneak in those little connecting moments without making them super obvious, right? Where we're not making a bulletin board announcement before we come and try and chat with them about something. But I also think there's a mechanism that's effective with teens is being super transparent and almost treating them like an adult. So I'm going to be really transparent. Like the way you phrased that was beautiful. Why not say that directly to your teen? You know what? I so badly I acknowledge you need privacy. I'm on the same page with you. I am more than happy to give you that space. Here's the line though that I get nervous around is when I worry that I actually don't have enough eyes on to know if you're okay. And because you're my number one, because you're the kid that I love so much, both sides of that coin are super important to me. And so, to parent you well, I want both sides of that coin. So tell me where you think I might have to be a little bit nosy, right? Where is it safe for me to ask you some questions? Or I don't want to pepper you all the time randomly, but can you just know that on Saturday mornings, I'm just going to check in with how you're doing? Or those kinds of setups gives kids a sense of, A, you care still. You haven't let me go completely. I'm not untethered and having to navigate this all by myself. B, you're not hovering over me 24/7. And C, there's some intentionality. I know what's coming. And so if on Saturday morning you knock on my door and bring me a cup of coffee and you go, let's sit on the deck for 10 minutes and be curious about something, that they don't have to come with a heightened defense response because you just barricaded them in their room, but you're inviting them. So opportunities to just connect intentionally, transparently, and make that normal. So if you can set the stage for that, that's where those conversations can happen when they're needed. But what I see all too often is people going, oh, but they want their privacy and they're pushing you out. Okay, fine, I won't. And then something starts to really genuinely worry them. And then they go in with all guns blazing, which is totally understandable because now our free reaction, our stress response is up, right? And we're panicking. But having conversations in a panic state rarely goes well for either of us.
You're here.
Right? So if we already know we've got that routine of these are things I am planning to talk with you about on occasion. So don't be surprised if I check in or ask you how that friendship is going, because that's what parents do. Right? So to be able to say that to your kids, I'm going to give you a bit of education here. This is what parents actually do with teenagers, much to your surprise or chagrin, but this is happening, right? And if we can be playful about that and set the stage, then those conversations feel less abrupt and less abrasive to kids in that age group. Yeah.
And as always, I think it's a good reminder that curiosity is important for us to be able to look beyond and to not just assume, but what's more important is our making sure that relationship comes first. And as long as we're taking care of our relationship with our kids, we can get to them more so much easier.
Yes.
Karen, as always, thank you for your insights. Thank you for sharing your experience and your knowledge, and for helping us see the strength in something that is hard. Those teen years are not always easy, and we can pause for a moment and look back at our own teen years and remember what it was like. I think it makes it a little easier. So
yeah,
appreciate your time.
Thank you for the conversation. It's good.
You're welcome. So we wish you the ability to find your ways in this and to make those moments a little easier. So Family Smart has received funding for this project from the Provincial Health Authority and the Ministry of Children and Family Development in partnership with Here to Help. We are grateful for their support, and we also want to be able to respond to your feedback. So please take a moment to let us know how we're doing, what you need from us as far as learnings, and know that that helps guide our work. We're appreciated that you're here. Thanks for learning with us.